Hey friends, it's Brittany. Welcome back to my channel. Today is a very special video, and as you can tell from the title, today is an announcement video and I am officially announcing that I'm pregnant. It feels so good to finally announce it on YouTube. And by pregnant, I mean like I'm really pregnant. Like tomorrow I'm gonna be 30 weeks pregnant, and you may be wondering why I waited so long to announce it. Part of it is just kind of timing. Like time is just slipping away so quickly. We've been so busy the last couple months, not even just with like baby stuff. We've just been busy with traveling, family events, weddings, just work. And so obviously sitting down to film a video, you guys know I work full time. So like, I feel like I've been wanting to film this video, but it's like finding the right time. And I finally got to the point where I was like, okay, no, like I need to just sit down and do it. We need to announce it because this is the best news. This is so exciting. The other reason I waited a bit to announce was because you can also see in this title that I did have a miscarriage. So we were waiting until we got far enough in the pregnancy just to make sure everything was okay. And in today's video, I really kind of just want to share my pregnancy journey. I'm also going to touch on our pregnancy loss from the spring and tell you more about that, because I know, like, me filming this video, I was watching these videos like 6 months ago, 7 months ago, like when I went through my miscarriage. Watching some of these YouTube videos where people talk about their pregnancy journeys, their miscarriages. It can be really relatable. It can really help people out. It can help people to kind of navigate their feelings on those situations. And I'm so thankful that we really live in this society now where we do have these online communities where people can really just connect and bond and share experiences, because for me it really does help me to navigate some of the joys and also difficulties of life. So if you're here today, if you're new, welcome. My name's Brittany. On my channel I primarily do grocery hauls and cooking content, but I do sprinkle in some other lifestyle content. So if you're here, you're probably on a pregnancy journey. You may be trying to conceive. You may be going through a pregnancy loss. And I just hope today that the information I share with you is, one, just like exciting to hear from someone who's excited about being pregnant and having a baby, but also some of the hard stuff. Just know that I'm there for you if you're going through a pregnancy loss, if you've experienced miscarriage or any type of loss. I'm so sorry, and I'm there for you and I feel for you, and I hope that this video will help you in some type of way. So let's go ahead and jump into it. I threw my glasses on so I can read. I did take notes. I have a piece of loose leaf with notes just so I can properly recap my pregnancy journey, but I'm gonna start by just talking about where I'm at now. So I am gonna be 30 weeks pregnant tomorrow, which is so incredibly hard to believe. It's really, really flying by. Overall, I'm feeling great, and we're just getting so excited. We're just so happy. We're getting so excited to meet our little baby in just 2 months. And you probably noticed, if you have been following my channel for a while, that you might, did you guys know, like, comment below if you don't follow me on Instagram. My Instagram is just my name, same as YouTube. You know I'm pregnant because I announced on Instagram. But if you don't follow me on Instagram and you only follow me on YouTube, did you have a feeling? Also, if you hear noises, my dog Oreo is right behind me as usual. Always, always, always. Okay, so where I was going with that is basically, like, I kind of dropped off with posting on YouTube. I was doing really good at the beginning of the year. I was posting like every week. And then obviously early pregnancy hit. And if you've been pregnant, or even if you haven't, you usually know the first trimester is rough and you're real tired. So just curious if you guys had a feeling, that's all. So before we get into like the meat and potatoes of this pregnancy, I did want to touch on my miscarriage. And I feel like it's something I can't just not talk about, because after experiencing it, I just feel compelled to share about it because I feel like it's one of those things until you experience it, you don't really fully understand that experience. And I was definitely one of those people. And I do feel like as a society, it's becoming more okay to share about it. I do feel like years ago people just didn't really talk about it as much, but it's kind of become one of those things where people become a little more vocal about it. And for me, it really helps to hear other people's stories because for me, when I was going through it, I was talking to my friends who had gone through miscarriages. I was watching YouTube videos just to better understand like why like my body was doing what it was doing beyond just like the biology of it, just to kind of validate my feelings and know that other people have been through similar experiences and are struggling with the same thing. So this pregnancy that I'm currently in is obviously not my first. So my first pregnancy was the pregnancy where I miscarried, and that happened in April. Derek and I, my husband and I, we were planning this child. We had been trying for about 5 months, and it was, I think it was the day before the day of when I was supposed to be getting my period, and I took a pregnancy test and it was positive, and I was so excited. I really didn't think I was gonna get emotional. But I was so excited and also just surprised because I don't know, when you're trying for a couple months and you've gotten negative tests or, you know, it hasn't happened yet, you know, you're just not sure if it will happen. And so I got the positive test and I immediately took another test, and then I was like, I need more tests because I just wanted to be sure before I told Derek. So I remember I ran out on my lunch break that day, got my pregnancy test at Target, and I went ahead and I bought a little pack of socks, baby socks, that I was gonna use to tell Derek about the pregnancy. So I got home, I took more pregnancy tests, I took 4 total. They were all positive and I was so excited. And that night I told Derek and he was so happy. And we looked at the test together and it was just a really special moment. And we're gonna cherish that forever. A couple days later, after I got the positive pregnancy test, Derek was at work and I went to the bathroom and I had started bleeding. And at first it was very light, but it was enough where I was concerned. You can spot an early pregnancy, but I just had this gut feeling that it wasn't that. I just knew something was wrong immediately. So I called my doctor and they told me the same thing. They said, it's very common, you can spot an early pregnancy, but if the bleeding progresses, like, you know, we need to continue to talk and monitor. So I remember calling them back because it was getting worse. And all of this was happening while I was working. And I still to this day don't know how I did this. And this all happened like right before a work meeting, and I remember having to like get on my computer and like run a meeting for work. And I feel inclined to mention it because miscarriage is one of those things that a lot of people don't know what's going on. It's not always the right time to say that like, hey, this is going on. And women continue to have to work through miscarriages, in most scenarios, you know, especially when it's early on. But I just remember that day being awful. I called Derek and I told him what was happening, and I told him that I thought I was having a miscarriage. And he immediately was like, I'm gonna come home from work. And then at the time we hadn't told my parents. I mean, it was literally like 3 or 4 days after I took the positive test. So we were planning to wait until we're a little farther along to surprise them and tell them. And so at that point I called my mom and I told her, and she was so caught off guard because, you know, she didn't know. So I was basically telling her like, hi mom, like, pretty sure I'm having a miscarriage. Like, she didn't know I was pregnant. And, you know, I talked with her for a long time and pretty much just waited for the doctor to call me back. And what's really unfortunate about the whole situation is I didn't hear back from the doctor until like later that afternoon, and all of this happened in the morning. So pretty much like all day I knew that something bad was happening, but I felt like no one was helping me. And it was to the point where I had to like call them back like at 3 o'clock because it was late. It was getting late in the day and I hadn't heard from anyone. So at that point, I finally got a hold of someone and they told me that pretty much the only thing they could do was like get me in for blood work to check my HCG levels, which basically is like the pregnancy hormone, to determine whether you're pregnant or not. They can see like if your levels are declining. But at that point it was so late in the day that like I wasn't even able to get in because they had taken so long to get back to me. So the next day I went in. At that point, like, I'm just full blown like bleeding and I knew that it was over. So that night was just really rough. Derek and I, we just spent time together. And we're just there for each other. It was really hard. So after that, I went in for my blood work, and then pretty much like the blood work, it showed that I was not pregnant, which at that point, basically my pregnancy was so early and the levels had already declined so much that by the time I took the blood work, it was like not pregnant. But for me, I knew I was pregnant because I got 4 positive pregnancy tests, and it's not like I just got one and it was a fluke. The most frustrating part about the whole experience, beyond like the loss of a pregnancy and the loss of a child, is that my doctor handled the situation so poorly. And if you can take anything from this video, if you are trying to get pregnant, or if you've been through miscarriage and you've not been happy with your doctor, or maybe you're like I said, you're trying to get pregnant and you're like, you don't love your doctor, is find a doctor who you can trust and rely on. Because when this stuff happens and you feel like your doctor is not there to support you, it makes it 10 times harder. Basically, I had to call. They never called me about my blood work. I got an email and it basically was just like a blanket statement. It was so awful. And if you don't know, I work in healthcare marketing, but I previously worked for like a large, like very well-known hospital on the East Coast. So to a certain extent, I'm familiar with how sometimes like doctors, they can lack compassion because they just get so exposed to stuff that it becomes almost normalized to them. So sometimes they forget, you know, the human side of it, like the feelings, the emotions. But I hadn't like personally experienced it until this event. And they emailed me and they basically were like, we got your blood work, your HCG levels do not register as pregnant. So it could have been one of 4 options. And it was like, you got a false positive, you weren't pregnant. This was a chemical pregnancy, which chemical pregnancy is basically just like a very early miscarriage, which is what mine was. And it was like 2 other things, but I was just baffled. that was the response. It was an electronic message. No one called me. No one picked up the phone to call. I literally had to call them to ask them my questions and figure out next steps. You know, when you go through something like this, you're processing. But beyond that, for me, I had questions like, okay, like, how long do I need to wait until we try again? Like, are there any concerns that I should be monitoring as I'm still going through this process in my body of miscarrying? It was so crazy, and it still makes me so angry that I had to go through that, and I don't think anyone should have to go through that. So, and I'm looking at my notes to make sure that I like say everything I want to say, because no one should have to go through that. Your feelings are valid. Just because there are a bunch of people that experience miscarriage in the world, and just because doctors see it all the time, does not mean that your feelings are not valid and that you shouldn't have the opportunity to ask questions. It is so important. If there's anything that you take from this video, that is like one of the biggest pieces of advice I can give to you, is like, you need to be your own advocate. If you don't feel like you're getting the care you need at your doctor, or you don't feel like you're being treated with respect or getting the support you need, get out. And I'll get to this like in a minute, but since then I've switched doctors and I couldn't be happier. It's been a completely different experience. And I am just so relieved that I did not have to deal with that practice again. So just to wrap up my overall thoughts and feelings on miscarriage, I think, as I mentioned, like, beyond the loss, one of the hardest things that I think that people don't think about who haven't experienced miscarriage is that your life still continues and you're still expected to perform your normal life duties. And I think that is what was so hard for me. I'm in a job where I don't get a lot of time off. So could I have taken time off? Yes. But at the same time, I didn't want to like blow through my leave, because of course we knew that we were like eventually going to try again, and hopefully I would get pregnant and I would want to save my leave for that future maternity leave. So I pretty much had to go about my life like nothing happened. And that was so hard, because I pretty much still was working and I didn't feel comfortable telling my immediate supervisor about the miscarriage, especially being a woman in the workplace. It's one of those things where I didn't even tell them about this pregnancy until a couple months in. It's one of those unfortunate things. We still live in a time where, I'm trying to think of the best way to say this. It's like, I didn't want them to actively know that I was trying to get pregnant, because I didn't want it to potentially like impact my annual review, etc., etc., etc. So I chose not to tell them about my miscarriage. I had to keep working like everything was fine. Of course, like, you know, you still have to do your regular chores. And then I know that there's women who go through miscarriage who already have kids. So then you're taking care of a family. And Derek and I's position, like, we don't have kids yet. This pregnancy now is our first baby. And I just can't imagine having to go through a miscarriage and already having a child, and then having to take care of them and take care of the household and all that stuff, and then potentially on top of a job. For me, that was like very eye-opening to recognize that it's awful that anyone has to even walk through miscarriage, but then have to walk through it with not being able to just take the time for yourself to mentally and physically recover. And I don't know if other countries, like if it's the same here, but it would be so nice if, I don't know, there was some almost like bereavement leave, right? You know, for my company, if someone passes away, there's bereavement leave. It would be nice if there was something like that for miscarriage and pregnancy loss. But that was so hard. And on one hand, like initially it was really hard, and then I kind of just embraced it in a sense, and that I just threw myself into my work as a distraction. Everyone has their own way of coping with loss and devastation, and that's kind of the route I took. But overall, I just want to say, as I'm wrapping up, you know, my experience with miscarriage in this video, if you've gone through something similar, I'm so sorry. It's so hard. I'm gonna try to not cry more because I don't want this whole video to be waterworks, but I'm just so sorry. It's so hard, and I know it's so hard because I've been there. I will tell you that you're always going to have a little bit of sadness in your heart for that loss, but things do get better. And just take the time you need for yourself. That's probably something I could have done a little better. I probably, in hindsight, should have taken some time off for myself. And just do what you need to do to take care of yourself first and foremost. Make sure that your doctor is giving you the attention you need and deserve. Make sure you're getting your questions answered. If you have friends and family who've gone through similar experiences, reach out to them. That helped me a ton. First thing I did after I processed and went through it for the first couple of days was I reached out to some of my friends who I knew had miscarriages. And luckily, I am one of the last of our friends to go through pregnancy. So I have several friends who have had successful pregnancies, but who have also miscarried. So getting their insights and just sharing experiences really helped me to process and grieve and just get through that tough experience. And like I said at the beginning of this video, it's fortunate that we are getting more vocal and just sharing experiences with miscarriage. Previously, that was not as widely accepted or talked about. So we are able to go on YouTube and watch videos about miscarriage and pregnancy loss and understand what other people are going through and have compassion for them. And it just helps you feel like you're not alone. And so that's the biggest thing for me, is really if you can just find support amongst your friends and family, find support online from people who have shared similar experiences and walk through similar struggles. That's so helpful. And one thing that I would recommend considering if you're trying to get pregnant, or maybe if you're in early pregnancy, one thing that I never thought of before I went through that miscarriage was telling family right away that I was pregnant. And looking back on it, I wish I had told our parents right away that I was pregnant. It's interesting that we typically will wait a couple weeks into the pregnancy, or even some people wait through the first full trimester until they announce. But going through the miscarriage, I really regretted not telling people sooner, specifically my parents, because when I called them, I was, miscarrying, and I kind of wish they had already known. So that's just one thing I'll throw out there to consider, is a lot of people wait because they want to make sure they don't miscarry, but then ultimately you're probably going to tell your loved ones that you went through pregnancy loss. So it's just helpful, I think, for them to know, so they can be praying for you, and if something does happen, they can be ready, and know what's going on so that they can support you during that hard time. Moving on from that topic and getting into this pregnancy, I will say that with the miscarriage, if we learned a lot from it, but one thing we knew for certain after that experience was we were ready to have a kid. We were so excited, and we wanted to try again right away. So when I had the very brief conversation with my terrible doctor, I did ask them when we could start trying again, and they said to wait until you have one more cycle after the miscarriage, make sure it's normal, you know, relatively normal for what's normal for you. And then once you've had that one cycle, you can try again. So that's exactly what we did. We waited one cycle and then we tried again. And for me, my expectations were not like, I'm gonna get pregnant right away, because with our first pregnancy, it had taken 5 months for me to conceive. And we had just gone away to Austin, Texas for a little getaway over Memorial Day weekend in May. Is that the right one? Anyway, we had just been away on vacation, and while I was there, I got sick. And when I got home, I was feeling so crappy. Like, not even, like, you're probably thinking like pregnancy symptom crappy. No. Like, this was like full-blown cold. And I knew that we had been trying, so I wanted to take medicine, like cold medicine, but since we've been trying, I was like, you know, maybe I should just take a pregnancy test just in case to make sure I'm not pregnant. And me thinking I was pregnant was like at a 0. Like, I really did not think I was going to be pregnant. Like, I had no expectations for that. It was more like for peace of mind, like, let me just roll this out so I can pop some Dayquil and like be comfortable. So I remember it was June 1st, and it was right before our wedding anniversary. And I told Derek, we were both working from home that day, and I went into his office and I was like, I feel awful. I was like, I'm gonna go take a pregnancy test just to like rule it out so that I can take cold medicine. And he's like, I have 12 minutes until I have to be on a conference call. And I'm like, good thing it only takes 3 minutes. So I went and I took the test, and I kid you not, like, as soon as I peed on the test, the line turned. It was an instant positive. I could not believe it. I ended up taking a second test, the digital one that says like pregnant or not pregnant, and it said pregnant, and I could not believe it. I was excited. I was scared. Obviously, because of the first miscarriage, I just had so many feelings. And I walked the test into Derek's office and showed him, and he was so excited. I was emotional. Like, I was like, I'm so scared because, you know, the first miscarriage, it was so traumatizing. And, you know, when you take that test again, it gets real and it gets scary because you're just afraid that the same thing is going to happen again. So luckily, I had already been researching new doctors, and I called the one that I ended up going with, and they were so great. Like, I explained my situation, I explained the miscarriage. They initially took my like request, and then they're like, we'll call you back, we'll have a nurse call you so she can like talk to you about like your previous miscarriage so we can like determine next steps or what makes most sense for your case. They got back to me right away. Like, we went over all my medical history, like the miscarriage experience, what that was like. And then they immediately were like, we want to get you in for blood work to check your HCG levels. So I think I did that the next day, and my levels were good. And they even brought me in like a second time to get that because they wanted to make sure that HCG levels were going up, and they were. And we were just so happy and so excited, and we felt so blessed. And I still look back on it and I can't believe that, you know, I got pregnant so soon after that. It was such a blessing, and we're just so thankful. So my doctor has just been so much better. And again, that's why I'm like, if you have a doctor that you do not like, get out. Just switch, make the switch, research. Because for me, that first trimester of pregnancy with this pregnancy was so anxiety filled because of the first miscarriage. And I think that because my first pregnancy experience was miscarriage, it almost, I don't want to say like it tainted it, but if your first pregnancy experience is miscarriage and then you go into your next pregnancy having that experience, it's like walking on eggshells the whole time. And I honestly feel like it didn't get better until I got into the second trimester, because you don't want to get your hopes up in that first trimester for something to like go wrong and it not work out. But my doctor, they were so nice, and I remember I got like the first and second round of HCG levels. And for me, one of my early pregnancy symptoms that really freaked me out was cramping. And I feel like no one really talks about cramping. Like, you hear about fatigue and nausea and vomiting and like all that stuff, but I've never heard anyone talk about cramping. And so I remember at that point, like, I was like well into the first couple weeks, and I was like getting real freaked out and paranoid. And I remember calling them and I was like, is there any way I could just like get more blood work just to make sure my levels are still good? And they were like, yeah, that's totally fine. Like, they were so supportive. They didn't even like think twice about it. So I got my blood work done and my levels were still good, and I just had peace of mind. So definitely, it's just make sure that you are at a practice where they're going to take good care of you and be compassionate and listen to you. And honestly just respect you. And so that was just a huge game changer for me, and for someone who did go through miscarriage previously, it helped me in that first trimester, just knowing that I had a doctor that supported me, and if something came up, I could call them. And even for me, like I mentioned, like I was when I found out I was pregnant, I was sick. I ended up being sick with bronchitis, and I was sick for like 3 weeks. And so I had to like call them and say, hey, like I have bronchitis. My primary care doctor wants to put me on steroids and antibiotics. Like, are these drugs okay? And they would like go through everything, make sure the drugs were safe, told me what over-the-counter meds I could take, which were very minimal. So I was pretty miserable the first couple weeks of pregnancy, beyond just pregnancy symptoms. And they've just been great about that. Anything that's come up where, you know, if I'm having to get medicine from another provider for whatever's going on, like even just recently I had like an eye infection, which is why I'm not wearing eye makeup today, which is also good because I've just been crying through this whole video. They like look at the eye drops, the drug name, look it up, make sure it's okay. Like, that level of detail has just been so great and given me so much peace of mind. So overall, so like I mentioned, I'm in the third trimester. Going back to the first trimester, my biggest symptoms were fatigue and nausea. The nausea was pretty consistent. I threw up a couple of times, like handful of times, mostly triggered by smell. But like I said, the like freakiest thing was the cramping. And the reason that freaked me out so much was because when I did go through that miscarriage, it was pretty much like a really bad period, except for the cramping was like horrible. So now, like when I was in that first trimester, I would get so nervous whenever I felt cramping. But they did tell me, you know, like when I asked about it, that that does happen. And for me, I felt like it happened like most of the first trimester. Like I would just feel very uncomfortable, like in that area. And that too, I think, is just because everything is like stretching and expanding to make room for the baby. But again, because I don't hear people talk about it, I was like, is this normal? And it is, but I wanted to mention that because if you've experienced that, or maybe if you're going into pregnancy and you start to experience that, that could be what that is. But beyond that, the first trimester, it went pretty smooth. Like the hardest thing again for me was just like the anxiety around coping with the previous loss and trying to stay calm and hopeful that everything was going to be okay. That was really the hardest part for me. And then once I got into the second trimester, amazing. Once you get over the hump of the first trimester, the second trimester just feels like a breeze. I feel like I finally started feeling like myself again, like finally able to just do like normal stuff. And like I mentioned, like I kind of fell off the face with YouTube because you're working full time. And then the last thing I wanted to do when I finished work was get on my computer and edit a video or film a video. So I kind of just gave myself grace, and I'm like, your body is doing a lot and you have to do what's best for you and just rest when you need it. And so that's kind of just what I did. And once I got into the second trimester, it was great. I felt so much better at that point. I had ultrasound, so we got to see baby and hear the heartbeat for the first time. And once you get the ultrasound, I've started feeling better because it almost is one of those things, it doesn't feel real until you've had the ultrasound, because, you know, in early pregnancy, you don't have a bump. You just kind of feel like garbage all the time. I will say me feeling sick was reassuring, because I was like, well, I guess that's a good sign, because that means my body is like doing what it needs to do and all that jazz. But it's hard because you don't get your first ultrasound until you're almost through your first trimester, which I didn't realize going into pregnancy. So I just remember the first trimester feeling so long, because you're just waiting to have your first ultrasound, see baby, make sure everything's okay. And then you also just don't feel good the entire time. But once I got into second trimester, I felt so much better. I started getting my energy back. I definitely did have food aversions the first trimester. Like, I didn't really like eating red meat. I remember like eating a hamburger and feeling sick. So I honestly haven't had a hamburger, I don't think, since first trimester. I am eating red meat again. I haven't had any like crazy cravings. At the beginning of pregnancy, like in the first trimester, there were a couple like random things I craved, but nothing out of the ordinary. And now I like look back at it, I'm like, I don't know if I've really had like consistent cravings, but I will say I've done a lot of baking once I got into second trimester, and we are getting into the holiday season. I feel like I've done a lot more baking. So I think I am craving like sweets is probably, I would say, is my biggest craving. But I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I mean, we're doing good. Everything so far, like recently, has been pretty smooth. Like with this pregnancy, I can't complain too much. I feel like first trimester is hard for everyone, but I was still able to function somewhat. And once you get into second trimester, it's just so much better. And now in third, I'm just getting bigger. And I can't believe it's just in 2 months, 2-ish months, we're gonna have baby here. And we're so excited. We actually just had our last ultrasound yesterday, and we got to see the baby. And the baby's moving now, and I can feel the baby move, and it's just really exciting. So we're feeling really blessed and excited. And Derek has been working on the nursery, and our baby shower is this coming weekend. So we're getting excited for that, and just to get the baby's room ready and all of that stuff. But that is my big announcement. So now my YouTube family knows. We did have a gender reveal. We do know the gender. I'm not mentioning it in this video because I am going to be posting a separate gender reveal video that I'll edit in the next week or two, and I'll definitely get that up before the end of December. So my due date is February 8th, so it's coming up really fast. It's so crazy because we were traveling so much. I feel like we are not prepared. Like, we just literally got the nursery kind of situated. And by situated, I mean like we have the foundation done, like we painted, and Derek had to touch up the ceiling and do some stuff, some renovations in there before we moved furniture in there. But we just, I think with the miscarriage too, for so long, we didn't even want to get our hopes up. Like, I know a lot of people, they immediately start shopping, they dive into research. But for me, I was just trying to like go day by day. And I think that again is like probably a good piece of advice is, you know, if you have experienced pregnancy loss and you're entering a new pregnancy, just take it day by day. For me, it was more so I didn't want to get my hopes up and start doing all this stuff for something to happen and then be devastated. So now we are in the third trimester. We're trying to get all this stuff done. I was like looking at labor and delivery classes today. I'm like, we're really running out of time. We got to get it together. But we're getting excited. We're throwing ourselves into getting ready for this baby to make its arrival, and we're just so excited. I'm so happy to share with you all. So I hope that this video was helpful or you enjoyed it. And I can't believe I got so emotional. I thought I was going to hold it together, but it's a hard topic. I think, you know, things do get better, but like I said, there's always just this little piece of your heart that will always be a little broken from that experience. And I feel for you all who are walking through that struggle right now, or have walked through it previously. But as someone who is on the other side now and pregnant with rainbow baby, I know it's all going to be worth it. And we couldn't be more grateful. And we know we're so blessed that we have this opportunity to have this sweet little baby. And we're so excited to meet baby very soon. So again, if you're new to my channel, I'd love to have you join. You can hit the subscribe button below. Drop a comment below if you have any questions about like my pregnancy thus far or miscarriage, or if you just want to share your thoughts on miscarriage or you need someone to talk to. Drop a comment below and I'll definitely respond to you. I know it's such a hard thing to go through, and even pregnancy itself is quite the journey and not for the faint of heart. So definitely respond below and I'll get back to you. But thank you all for watching, and thank you so much for your support. I am going to be honest, I'm probably not going to be sharing a ton of pregnancy content because, as you can see, like, I'm pretty much 7 months in and I haven't shared anything until today. And we just have a couple months left, but I would love to have you join my YouTube family and check in for some of my other videos. And I hope to see you all very soon in my next video. Thanks for watching. Bye.